This is Mike Smyth. We start this morning with the developing news in the Meng Wanzhou case and the two Michaels, Michael Spavor, Michael Kovrig, both still locked up in China. Canada says China arrested these two Canadians, falsely accused them of being spies in retaliation for Canada's arrest of tech executive Meng Wanzhou. Now, the stunning news here this morning that Canada authorized Meng Wanzhou's family to travel to Canada for a family reunion despite the COVID-19 restrictions. Her husband arrived in October. Her two children arrived in December. They are all still in Canada. What about the two Michaels? The two Michaels still locked up in China while we're letting Meng Wanzhou's family travel to Canada. You got to be kidding me. This is a shocking story this morning that we're going to following for you. Let's talk about it now with my guest, Raquel Dancho, federal conservative critic for immigration, refugees, and citizenship. I'm very pleased to welcome her to the show. Hello, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Great to be here with you.
What are your thoughts on this situation? Like when you heard that Meng Wanzhou's family had been allowed to enter Canada, what were your thoughts?
I think my thoughts were really the same as what Canadians will feel when they hear the news. It's outraged by the news that Meng Wanzhou got really a special travel exemption for her family to fly into Canada to be with her over the holidays. And meanwhile, millions of Canadians just went through a holiday season separated by law from their families. I think Canadians will rightfully be outraged by the luxuries afforded her that they're not even allowed to get in our own country. And we also heard that she had broke public health guidelines in BC and rented out a restaurant and had 14 people together on Christmas Day, presumably with her family that was just brought into the country. So she's getting this luxury treatment. And meanwhile, the Michaels have been wrongfully imprisoned, as you mentioned, for over 2 years without basic human rights, very little consular access or access to their families. So it's just really infuriating, I think. And I think Canadians will feel the same when they hear the news, Mike.
Okay, the Justin Trudeau government is saying today that there was no special treatment given to Meng Wanzhou. This was not a special exemption, that under the existing system that we have, there is an ability for Immigration Canada to allow family reunification and to allow family members into the country. Are you saying that you're saying the rules were broken here? The government's saying the rules were not broken.
We looked into that further, and we don't believe that they're being very truthful because the Family Reunification Act only applies to permanent residents or Canadian citizens, or in very special circumstances, workers, visitors, students, or refugees. And she is none of those things. So from what we can gather, she is not eligible under the family reunification that we've really been fighting for as conservatives and other opposition parties since the onset of the pandemic. We've been fighting tooth and nail for people to be reunited. There's many families across the American-U.S. border that have been separated since the onset of the pandemic. There's people that are consistently declined to be reunited, and yet here she is with this special access. So we're thinking it may have been with something called the national interest exemption, which has to be approved by a cabinet minister. So they're not being very transparent. They're not being forthcoming. They need to be honest with Canadians. And Mike, what I found interesting is yesterday when the Prime Minister's office was asked if he knew about this, they declined to comment. So very peculiar there.
Okay, the government is saying that this decision was made independently by Immigration Canada, but under the existing rules, like these family reunifications are allowed for a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident of Canada. Meng Wanzhou is neither of those, right? She's not a citizen of Canada. She's not a permanent resident of Canada, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that therefore you think that the rules have been broken. Okay, we need more clarification on that. But let me ask you about the two Michaels here now, because when I heard this story, I was shocked too. I just thought, you got to be kidding me. And then I thought, well, is there some diplomacy going on here? Like maybe the two Michaels are getting family access. And the government did put out a statement that's saying the two Michaels have received increased family access. Now, what does that mean? Because we see CBC is reporting that they were able to exchange letters. The Globe and Mail this morning is saying that Michael Spavor was able to have a phone call. I mean, that is not the same as having a reunification with your family. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need a lot more transparency from the Liberal government. Yesterday on CTV Power Play, the Liberal representatives said unequivocally that it was a decision made independently of the political level of government. So I do find it very convenient that this story about increased consular access came out just right after this other story broke. And I think it's interesting that on one hand, the Liberals are saying the decision was not political, but now they're saying, oh, well, we got something out of it for the Michaels. So really, which one is it? And as you said, and pointed out rightfully, it's not nearly the same. They're not being treated at all like Meng Wanzhou with their luxuries. They've been imprisoned in Chinese communist prisons for 2 years. Unlawfully. They had very little consular access. They've had some letters, and as you said, perhaps a phone call. That's not the same as getting your family flown in and spending Christmas together in your $13 million Vancouver mansion. I'm sorry. That is not the same.
Diplomacy can be a messy business. We all know that. And I could maybe understand this if there was an equal exchange of family access. Like if the two Michaels, if their families had been allowed to travel to China to be reunited with the two Michaels, maybe I could see it then. But that doesn't appear to have happened here.
No, it doesn't. And I'm getting an increasing amount of emails and phone calls from across the country in my immigration file, but also from my own constituents of people really getting sick and tired, frankly, of being bullied by China. And we've had 5 years of this prime minister, and yet we're left in this weakened position where we can't stand up for ourselves, and all we get for the two Michaels is some crumbs, while Meng Wanzhou is getting luxury treatment. So I think Canadians rightfully are getting pretty fed up with this kind of treatment from China, and we need a federal government that's willing to stand up for Canadians, and we're not seeing that.
Speaking to Raquel Dancho, she is the federal conservative immigration critic. Do you think that, I don't know, maybe Canada lost a diplomatic opportunity here? I mean, if we were going to give a family reunification to Meng Wanzhou, I mean, this could have been a glorious opportunity to get something for our people. And instead, it seems like a very, very lopsided, unequal exchange here. I mean, would you have been open and agreeable to an equal exchange, like equal family access visits, if that could have been negotiated?
Well, really, I think all Canadians want the Michaels to be freed, and it's been well over 2 years that they've been kept in these horrible conditions, and they've been imprisoned unlawfully. They haven't had the same access and rights to the rule of law that Meng Wanzhou has had. So it's not by any means equal. And I would like to see, I think all Canadians would like to see the Trudeau government take a stronger stance. For example, Huawei, we're the only of our Five Eyes allies that has not made a decision to kick out or restrict Huawei from Canadian soil. There are other countries like Australia, the UK, others that are taking a much stronger stance. Why are we not going with our allies and standing up for our values and the rule of law? I just don't understand why we're having such a weak response and allowing the two Michaels to be unlawfully imprisoned for 2 years. I don't understand it, Mike.
I really feel for these two men and their families, 2 years in a Chinese jail, very little access to Canadian consular services, no access to their families. It's just heartbreaking, the situation. Do you think, like most Canadians obviously feel like you do, they just want these guys home. Like, let's bring them home. Do you think that at this point, most Canadians would say, look, I don't really give a flying you-know-what about Meng Wanzhou. Maybe just send her back, send her to China and in exchange for the two Michaels. Do you think that would be reasonable?
I think it's a really complicated process with their extradition agreement with the United States. I think it has to go through, again, we're a rule of law country, unlike what seems to be going on in China. So I think we have to, and I think they are proceeding with caution. But again, I think we're being very weak in our response. Remember, the Chinese put on terribly damaging tariffs to our farmers, our pork farmers, canola, soybeans. Like, they're doing everything to us. We found out, of course, from the Globe and Mail in the fall that Operation Fox Hunt has been going on, where we're seeing Chinese espionage, Chinese officials coming and intimidating Canadians on our own soil, Chinese Canadians becoming intimidated and threatened by Chinese officials. So there is a lot of encroachment on Canadian liberties from the Chinese, and yet we're just getting crumbs for the two Michaels. So I think Canadians want to see our government stand up for us and really put forward a strong policy on China, and that's not what we've been seeing.
Last question for you. We're just a few days away from a new American president being sworn in. Under the Joe Biden administration, maybe they will have a completely different approach to this case. Is it your hope that the American policy on this Meng Wanzhou dispute is changed and results in the two Michaels maybe coming home to Canada? Is that your hope?
I think our hope is that Canada is able to stand up in partnership with our allies to the Chinese. So regardless of who the American president is, it has not been going well for Canada and for China. We need our allies, and we need to be able to put forward a strong stance, united together, to stand up to the bully that is China. So I think ultimately we need to do whatever we can to gain their release and to make sure China understands that they can't just push Canada around. So that's what I'd like to see.
Thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Same to you. That's Raquel Dancho. She's the federal conservative MP from Manitoba. She's the official opposition critic for immigration, commenting on the case of Meng Wanzhou and the two Michaels in China. This is extraordinary to me that we allow a family reunification for Meng Wanzhou. Her family is allowed to come to Canada despite the pandemic. But what about the two Michaels still locked up in China? The government saying, well, we've got something for them too. We've got increased family access. It sounds like they got a phone call or a letter. That is not the same thing. Do you think Canada is being tough enough here against China in this diplomatic dispute? Phone me on it now and tell me what you think.